Hey everyone, today's conversation is about medical affairs. It's about engagement with KOLs. It's talking about the pandemic and how it's changed engagement. So if you are in clinical research, if you are in engaging with MSLs, if you engaging as an MSL or in medical affairs, if you are medical information, you're going to care about today's discussion. Our guest today, we are very lucky to have her. I've known her for, well, several years at this point. She's a biopharma medical affairs expert. She has the expertise which most people are looking for nowadays, which is that rare disease expertise. So she's my friend, Irene von Hennigs. How are you, Irene?
Hello, Darshan. How are you?
Good. Just to clarify, we are both clinicians, but she is not. Neither one of us are providing clinical advice here. I'm a lawyer. I'm not providing legal advice. I also want to be clear that we do not. This does not represent the opinions. Does not necessarily represent the opinions of the host, the guest, our employers, or our clients. I also do want to clarify that we would love to hear from you. We would love your conversation. So please leave a comment, please share, please ask our guests questions. You can always find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to my website at DarshanTalks.com. You can actually also reach Irene on her LinkedIn page, Irene von Hennigs. And I've had her on before. You can see her other videos as well, but we're lucky to have her today. So Irene, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Darshan?
Great. Thank you again for coming on. A couple of different questions. So we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic. Everyone's talked about how the pandemic has changed everything. Everyone talks primarily about how patients are now saying, you know what, I don't want to deal with going into the doctor. Convenience has become king. Um, Context and convenience is king, which is really interesting because you would think that would have always been the case, but I think whose convenience we look to is changing. So talk to me a little bit about, as a expert who's dealing in medical affairs, the role is changing, the experiences are changing, but what changes are you actually seeing?
Yeah, that's very interesting, Darshan. The biggest change, which we didn't really understand how it's going to affect us when the pandemic hit, because medical affairs and MSLs, they've always been remote, so we've done a lot of virtual interactions in the past. However, what we are really losing is the value of the face-to-face interactions, and what we're realizing is that things that you discuss face to face are very different than what we would discuss on a Zoom call, which is very interesting because you're seeing the person, you think it's live, but it's not the same. You have a limited time. You're going to end on time. You're really sticking to an agenda versus those personal conversations. And I tell you, it hit me when we went to the first live meeting, and I connected with my team for the first time. And the things that came up, we've been talking for a year, but the things that came up were very different, were very personal. And this is what we lost during the pandemic. It's really the connection, the face-to-face connection with our KOLs and our customers.
So that's interesting. You talk about that personal connection, but one might argue, is that really the role of MSLs? Isn't the goal of an MSL to really be in the business of sharing scientific discussions, answering questions, and move on? You're not in the sales business. Why does that personal connection matter?
Absolutely. We're not in the sales business. But again, remember, there is a relationship building, right? Whether you and I are having a scientific discussion or attending a talk, that face-to-face interaction, the live interaction is so valuable where after all, we are human beings, we're connecting and we are reading each other and it's starting to realize, what value do I get from the relationship? Oh, Darshan is very interesting. He can answer a lot of the questions that I have. He can add to my knowledge and my expertise. And that face-to-face interaction is, it's missing. However, there are ways to get over this. We learned a lot during the past couple of years how an MSL team can overcome this obstacle, despite the fact that we are definitely, medical affairs is nothing about sales. We provide information. However, that human touch is missing in that interaction to provide information, answer questions. It's very formal when you are on a Zoom call versus sitting and maybe in the office and noticing maybe hobbies and interests of the person you're talking to. It's that human factor that's missing nowadays from the KOL engagement and relationship building.
So you talk about this missing human factor, but the fact is that in the end, everyone's expectations have changed. So yes, you want to build that human factor in the same way the doctor wants to build the human factor with their patients. Is it now a time where you start finding new experts who can connect despite it being a Zoom meeting? Like, is it changing who you choose as KOLs?
It shouldn't really, because the experts are the experts, and medical affairs always goes to the experts to advance knowledge and awareness, right, in science. It shouldn't. And what I realize is that we've come a long way, yet customers who did not like, or weren't comfortable with digital, interactions, we've overcome this. Everybody, I think, is very comfortable with Zoom right now. We've done a lot of meetings on that. It doesn't change that. What it changed, again, is sitting in front of somebody and having an honest discussion.
So you talk about this honest discussion. So talk to me now. Obviously, as we go more and more digital and we start talking more and more about the fact that these are Zoom conversations, we just have more data about people because of this. So how do you actually land up choosing the KOLs? And do you even define them as KOLs? I know there's been a whole discussion for several years about whether we should be calling them KOLs or not. So what is your take on that as well?
They're thought leaders, right? It's really I agree with you. The key opinion leader versus the thought leader. It's really an expert. What we're looking for, we're medical affairs partners with experts, and that expertise come through a defined criteria that we have. The author, the publications, the presentations, the associations. What makes you an expert is what we look for. And again, it's a partnership. It is a collaboration. We have science and we have medicine, and there is, value with learning from the experts and engaging with them. So that didn't change, really. That didn't change. It's how do we overcome that? The fact that now we're interacting in a digital world is a different story. So. Again, it's time is really so valuable nowadays. Our physicians and our healthcare practitioners are very busy, treating patients with COVID and with other things. Hospitals are full, and there is a shortage on staff. So our physicians are busier than ever because a lot of the healthcare practitioners are out of the office. So why would I give you time to talk to me? What value are you bringing to me? What medical affairs personnel need to know is, preparation before and after the meeting, and having a plan on what information can I provide to my physician or my customer. What did the customer ask about? What information can I add to their knowledge? If you are in a rare disease and you have data that is of interest to the medical world, then you're in a good position. But again, you have one chance, knowing your data and talking to your customers as a peer-to-peer interactions and scientific discussion, and being able to hold a conversation and scientific exchange will definitely open the door to the next interaction. And this is, again, nothing different than building a relationship with any other human being, right? It's what's in it for me. What are you providing? My time is so valuable. What are you going to add to my knowledge and my expertise during that limited time? And that's where preparation, training, MSL expertise, and having a plan before you connect with that physician will make a lot of difference.
So talk to me a little bit about how you train MSLs to really find out how to find the things that are important to that key opinion leader, to that thought leader, because that's going to play a huge role in what that engagement looks like and whether the MSL is invited back to have another conversation.
Great question, Darshan. So, MSLs, they come with a background. They're normally PharmD, PhD, MD, and of course, there are other exceptions as well. Healthcare practitioners, they come with the knowledge, and they come with a lot of experience sometimes, and they come with expertise. However, I think the trickiest thing of being an MSL is answering questions accurately and very quickly. So when you are put, and normally, we interact with experts, with challenging experts that have all the expertise. And so they're going to push back on the information that you're providing to them, right? When you are put in a very difficult position where there is an objection about data that you believe in, this is the really tipping point. This is where the MSL can either fall back or move forward, right? So training the MSLs on the art of scientific exchange, which I love to call it the dialogue map, is where do you go? If Darshan and I are having a challenging conversation and Darshan picks something that's going to put me in a very uncomfortable position, I want to be ready. I want to go to my bank of information and pull that piece of information that I'm going to provide Darshan, and have that negotiation and that scientific exchange. Many of us scientists, and you know that as well, we love doing this. However, difficult situations where you are getting pushback on what you are sharing with your customer or any other, any human being, is what puts you in an uncomfortable position. So being prepared and training the team on the most difficult situations that you can face puts them in a very good position. I know how to handle that. It's kind of like that visualization training, when you visualize your situation, kind of they use it in sports, right? Training. When you visualize yourself in that difficult position and you have a plan in your brain, you are more prepared to face this challenge.
I love it. I've never heard the term a dialogue map before. And I think it's a really interesting angle on how these conversations can go. In sales, there's something called the challenger method. Have you ever heard of it before?
Yes.
To me, it sounds, obviously this is not sales, but it's the conversation of, I'm not treating you like someone who I need to explain the basics to. You're going to challenge me on information I know. How do I address that? How do we come to it as two peers discussing information? I'm not trying to make a sale. I'm trying to demonstrate information that you may potentially find valuable in your own treatment. How do you, as an expert in this area, help frame that dialogue map to identify what are the key areas? And my second question, well, let's this one go first, and then we'll ask the second one.
So the dialogue map is nothing more than a navigation. So you're taking a route, but you hit a traffic jam. How are you going to get out of it? And what alternative road do you take? The way we develop the dialogue map is through, brainstorming. Darshan, let's pick a topic. And let's say you ask me this question and I answer you, where do we go next? And what are the possibilities of challenges and objections that we're going to face? And what data do I need to provide you? What data is in my treasure box that I can pull from to really navigate and take that alternative route? This takes a lot of brainstorming. It takes a lot of expertise and knowledge. But remember, in medical affairs, you have a lot of brains. And this is where I think, capitalizing on these brains and putting the team together and having brainstorming sessions and pushing back on each other. Life doesn't have to be on a cruise control. Those challenging situations, if we don't practice on our own, we're not going to be prepared to sit down and have a meaningful scientific discussion with our customers.
So it's interesting. You use the term, it's a map. It's identifying the direction. What is the destination?
The destination is increasing the knowledge and awareness, number one, with the data that you have in your heart. But the other destination that we get out of this is collecting insights. Maybe we are wrong. We're not always right. Maybe there are different opinions. So being open-minded and collecting those insights and listening to our customers is very important, because we don't have to stick to the status quo. There are other alternative roads that we can take if we listen and we act on what we're hearing.
So you talk about the goal is sort of this two-way dialogue, and it's to sort of share information. I guess my question then becomes, is that process more difficult when you're talking about a rare disease? Because yes, if you're talking about diabetes, we all, I mean, I've been through pharmacy school. You've been, I forget, are you a PhD or a PharmD?
PharmD.
Okay, so we've both been through PharmD school. Okay, I forgot. But you're just so smart. I always think you're also a PhD on top of it. Anyway, uh, but ignoring that part of it. My question is, with rare diseases, I have to imagine that with diabetes, we all kind of know. Here's what we were taught in pharmacy school. Here we know what diabetes is like. But you're talking about a rare disease state. Everyone's still figuring themselves out. You've seen a patient, you've seen two, you've seen five. Is that representative? And what does that really mean? How do you have that conversation and not walk every single time into a difficult conversation because you don't know what that particular patient was like?
Yeah, I think knowing your audience, which is a key in any, whether you're presenting or meeting one-on-one, knowing your audience is very important. Knowing what you're walking into and the knowledge of the person you're speaking with, whether they're experts or KOLs or healthcare practitioners, is really, again, going back to that planning for that interaction. Knowing where they are, what have they done, what experience, what did they publish on, what did they speak on in the past, will put you in a much better position in planning your route or that scientific exchange for that interaction.
So it's really doing the background on the physician you are potentially going to be, and I keep saying physician, but it could be any healthcare provider, but the healthcare provider you're going to be talking to. When you start doing the background, how do you recommend that an MSL start doing that? Is it just go to their LinkedIn page, look up what they've done, or is there a deeper process that you teach MSLs to go into?
Nowadays it's much easier, Darshan, than when I started 27 years ago. You have a wealth of information. You just go on PubMed, go on Google, search out, look at LinkedIn if the physician is on LinkedIn. But there's a lot of information, and many companies also, they have tools and resources where timely alerts are going to the MSLs. A publication comes out, and again, going back to be prepared with who you're interacting with. Those meetings are very, very valuable to both the HCP that we're interacting with and to the medical affairs personnel. Be prepared, make that valuable time worth it, so that there is a repeat and there is a value out of it. Very often we medical affairs send a survey to better understand the value of the medical team, and mostly MSLs. And one of the questions is, how valuable is that interaction to you? And honestly, if you have a well-trained and a strategic team that understands the value of that time with your physician or the healthcare practitioner, you will get a very high rating. And if not, then this is something you need to work on, right?
So it's interesting. You mentioned you do the Google search, you do the you have the tools, you have the alerts. I'm curious, do you have those alerts? Do you use the alerts only for, here's an article that Dr. Smith may find interesting because this is about XYZ disease state? Or is it also, Dr. Smith mentioned that his child is taking tuba lessons, and here's a really interesting tuba lesson course that just popped up. How far do you go build that human connection to make those field force engagements more valuable, not just for the field force people, but for the physician themselves, because they're now seeing different value in the engagements?
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, going back to the human factor, right? It's
Yeah.
important that I know what does Darshan like if I'm talking to you, right? And the art of scientific exchange is going back and forth. There's a little bit of personal, there's a little bit of, professional and scientific, where you go back and forth and you deviate a little bit and talk about your kid who's a star and, planning to go to the Olympics. And then you go back to, your patients and your knowledge and your needs for scientific information. And this is, again, it's something that you have to overcome if you are not in a live face-to-face interaction.
So let me ask you a couple of questions that have popped up recently overall, that other friends have raised, not in the context of this conversation, but you are beautifully placed to answer some of these questions. So one question I had was, why is it that that you see these robust medical affairs systems in brand companies, but don't see them in generic companies? If the value is in the scientific exchange, why does that value diminish once you get to generic companies?
That, maybe it's a knowledge and where the product is, and talking about rare disease, where the knowledge is. So it's that hunger for scientific information and knowledge. However, I would say that, there's never, we never reach that knowledge. Even if you talk about the common diseases, the diabetes and the hypertension, there's always advancement in science. There's always more that you need to know. There's always new targets to go. But think about it that way. The hunger for knowledge in a rare disease and new data or new paradigm in the treatment of this rare disease, the door is open wider than the generic more common knowledge.
So what I think you're saying is that um, the generic companies are working off of a different model, and they are not necessarily, again, speaking generalities, and that's not always true, but for the most part, they're really working off of margin, and the hunger for that scientific discussion is less prevalent in some of the more generic companies than, say, a branded company that's really looking to engage and discuss and move the disease process forward, the understanding of the disease process forward. Is that fair, or did I misconstrue what you said?
It is fair unless you're extremely innovative and creative. Years ago, I worked on a very, very, very old product. And what we did with that product was unreal. And it was basically because of the creativity of the company, the marketing campaigns, really capitalizing on what physicians need and what is the biggest unmet need with patients. That was a lot of fun because it was a very old product that we took from a no name to a major player in that market.
Very, very interesting. And we should do a totally separate talk on just that, because that sounds incredible. The second question I've gotten more recently is, I have several pharmacist friends who've mentioned, and I don't remember in this specific instance if I'd actually referred her to you, but there's this goal of, I'd love to be in industry, I'd love to work in medical affairs, I really want to help out. But I have children, and now that we're in this working from home situation, is there a role for me? What is your take on that? Is the field force always going to be on the field, or is there now this hybrid force that's developing, and or a work from home force that's a tele MSL force that's coming about?
Depends on the position. So if you're in MSL, it's no different than how it was 27 years ago when I started. I had kids. I worked from home, and I'm hoping that the world will open up again now that the Omicron's going down. We go back to it. This is no different than the past. So I encouraged this person who's interested with kids working from home. there is a way. It's really organizing your time management, having a dedicated office space to work from home, and just having that mentality of, I am in an office. It's no different than working from a true office, right? Um, so it's doable. It's not a challenge. And again, MSLs have always worked from home. They've always been in the field, and MSLs are meant to travel quite a bit. So there is a way. It is a skill that you develop over time, but it's also a mindset that, me working from my home office is no different than being in a true office. So it's not free time. It's not. You are working, you're committed to the company, and you're committed to that work schedule as well. And there's a lot of success stories. And you mentioned that individual who has kids. It's very doable. I've had little kids and 3 of them at the same time, and it's doable. With help and with organization and talk to people who have done it in the past. It's definitely possible.
So do you find? I mean, we're in this world of diversity, equity, inclusion, and making sure that people feel that things are possible. Do you find that the model as it exists favors men who may not be shouldering the same burdens in childcare as women? Or no, you don't think that's necessarily true, because it's just how you organize your goals and manage them from there?
Now, I don't think so. From my point of view, everybody has an opportunity, and I think the key to it is be prepared for the interview. Do your homework about the company. Know the drugs. Know the science. Remember, you're interviewing with scientists here, and I can't tell you how important that interview and that first impression is. And honestly, Darshan, when we get on an interview and we're looking at the candidate, I don't think about, where they're from, what they're doing, the kids or no kids. You don't think about any of that. You're really evaluating the expertise of that person, and you're visualizing them in front of customers and how they're going to be. And honestly, if you don't prepare for an interview and you're going for it, there's no way you're going to succeed. So I've given individuals with absolutely no experience in pharma before that really impressed me when they came to the interview. This is the key to your success if you're trying to step into pharma.
I love it. One last question, because we're already well over time, but you're always such a fun conversationalist to have these discussions with. We talked a little bit about how PharmDs, PhDs, MDs, and MDs are rare, I would say, but PharmD, PhDs, MDs are theoretically the most common MSLs for the most part. Why is it that RNs, who are often the queens of the healthcare field, are not as well represented in medical affairs?
They are, and I've had many RNs and very successful on the team. It depends on the company. Many companies, they value that depending on what the product is and what the company and where we're going and what we're trying, what is the goal. And at some instances, and there are RN teams, that many companies have RN teams because of what the product is and what is the end goal of educating those physicians. When the product is a hardcore pharmacology, deep into the mechanism of action, you need somebody who has the background and the knowledge to address this. However, a lot of products need a lot of clinical support behind them, and that's where the RNs comes. They provide a lot of value. But again, it depends on the company, the product, and the objective.
Okay, so it's really just how the company defines that. So the next time we have you on, we really should talk about how the company positions itself and starts thinking about what its teams are going to start looking like. Because I think team constitution is such an important piece of deciding the success of just sharing the scientific message, if you will. So that should be really, really interesting. As you know, we're going to sort of start wrapping out. So a couple of different questions for you. The easiest one is, how can people reach you?
LinkedIn, and I saw that you posted that.
Yep, right up there. So for those people who are just sort of listening to this, it's linkedin.com/IN/Irene von Hennigs. And you can find her on LinkedIn. She's very easily accessible. What is a question you'd like to actually ask the audience?
What is the most innovative thing that you've done during the pandemic to be successful?
Ooh, I like to try to answer this question. I like to try to answer this question just as a first off, and I'm trying to think what is the most innovative thing I've done. I'm launching a software in the medical affairs space. That's the most
Wow.
innovative thing. Yeah. So you and I will have a conversation about it at some point.
Absolutely.
So that's two. And the last question for you: what is something you learned in the last month?
What I learned in the last month is listening is so important, and changing the status quo is, I think it's the new norm now.
I love it. Again, thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing as always. Our guest for today, Irene von Hennigs. Irene, this was a pleasure. And any last words?
Thank you, Darshan. Everybody stay well and do some science.